Hey there, I'm Chris Minetti, host of the Smart Author podcast. In this episode, I speak with Owen Sammarone of Unleash the Knowledge, and we discussed how to use content on social media to sell your book. If you're currently stuck with how to market your book on socials, then this episode will be perfect for you, as it will give you the steps and tools that you need to be able to create content that sells your book. Some of the main topics we will be covering today include how Instagram stacks up against other social channels for selling your book, Owen's strategies for repurposing your book to sell more copies, and how you can implement Owen's book Bytes strategy for yourself. At the end of this episode, please make sure you visit our website where you can find all the show notes and links mentioned with Owen. And if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you give us a subscribe so that you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. Now let's head over to this fantastic interview. Welcome back to another episode of the Smart Author podcast. Today I'm joined by Owen Sammarone. Owen, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, most welcome. Owen is someone who is like crazy on Instagram. You got 100,000 followers, right?
Yes, we just crossed 100K. I think we're at 102 today.
And your niche and avatar on that platform is primarily authors.
Yeah, so technically the audience member is a reader, nonfiction reader, someone who's into personal development, but the business side and the work I really do and how I pay the bills is nonfiction author.
Cool. So I would love to know, Owen, how you used to be a sports guy from memory. And yeah, I mean, you've recently come into this space in the last few years. I would love to know how you made that transition or how you stumbled into, doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. People always find it funny. It's like, how do you go from basketball to books? And I'm like, to be honest, I mean, it's not a crazy jump as you might think. Yeah, so the background's in college basketball. I went to undergrad up in Rhode Island, over here in the States. And I was a couple weeks into school and I was like, man, I can, screw up the next 4 years like most of these kids are doing, or I could really make my time worthwhile. So I headed down to the basketball arena. And this is a big part of my story, but there was this one room with the light on and I rang a bell and a girl came out and essentially I asked for a job opening with the basketball team. And long story short, I spent literally every waking minute in the gym and helping out the basketball team. So I was a student manager for the college team. And then that turned into a graduate assistant role into another school after I graduated, which is essentially the next step to kind of become a coach or become an executive in basketball. And it was honestly during those years that I really got into personal development. High school me was very social, played sports, was not really into the whole academic world. So I had the college was extremely formidable for my growth and who I am today, essentially. And I was just a sponge, honestly, to simply say to my coach. And he was reading Ryan Holiday, he was listening to Lewis Howes and Tim Ferriss and all these big podcasts and these big authors over in the States that have global audiences. And I was just consuming everything he was consuming and, did basketball for 6 years and won a couple championships. And they treated me really well. And they gave me this frame jersey for essentially being a water boy or towel boy. But I had a pretty integral role with the team despite being low on the totem pole, so to speak. But it was a massive experience for me and I wouldn't trade it for a second. But then COVID started creeping up and I had started sharing the books I was reading on Instagram, literally just a book a day and sharing a couple takeaways that was resonating with me. And long story short with that, it started growing pretty fast and COVID hit and I realized basketball was probably done for me just because I was seeing what the coaches' lifestyles looked like and they were never with their families and it was pretty discouraging to me and thinking long term, which has always been a mindset of mine. I ultimately decided to leave. And then the summer of COVID into the fall, I pretty much went all in into sharing books and connecting with authors and realizing that authors stink at marketing and publishers stink at marketing and they're still operating as if it's 1905, and just found this massive niche to support folks with branding and messaging and positioning and marketing. And especially leveraging the audience I was building, which was now probably at like 30K, just on Instagram. And essentially, since then, I've just blasted a bunch of other channels, have a presence on all social channels, and have developed as a stronger marketer myself. Open up a couple other service options for folks, and yeah, that brings us to today. But essentially, just the basketball journey really opened my eyes to like how to achieve greatness and excellence, and reading and listening to super successful people was a massive part of that, to not reinvent the wheel and just kind of follow suit with a lot of what other people have done. So that's essentially what I'm doing, and going to continue doing it. And hopefully my results can, turn out close to what I'm envisioning, or people I look up to.
Yeah, nice. And so you mentioned you have a following on several social channels. How, I know you mainly focus on doing reels and things like that to share a lot of the tactics and things that you're learning in books on Instagram. Do you find that that strategy also works and is applicable to platforms like TikTok, which are also quite heavily video focused?
Yeah, I think 100% the product you want to say, which is what these companies refer to them as, these reels, these short punchy videos, are absolutely the top tier content format today. It is funny though, like something will pop on TikTok for me that won't pop on Instagram, and vice versa. So it is a little odd. Obviously, they're two different algorithms, but the best advice to anyone who's looking to get into social media or build a brand around themselves or their book or whomever or whatever they're interested in is to create these short punchy videos, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, 60 seconds. And to be honest, it's not even a challenge, I would think. I mean, I know people look at it and they're like, oh my gosh, I have to shoot these videos. But pre TikTok, it was, let's shoot a 20-minute YouTube video and edit it all. And that's a way more daunting task, I'd say, than a couple punchy videos. So now, one YouTube video is like 20 little TikTok videos. But yeah, just to answer your question, I mean, I'm still posting static posts and carousels and, graphics of some sort, but it's all about this punchy type of video because people are just short attention span. They're scrolling quickly. They want to be roped in.
Sure. And so your business is primarily around basically giving some level of shout outs for authors in the form of reading the content from their books potentially, and things like that. For the authors listening now, what would be some strategies that they can also replicate what you're doing on their own social channels?
Yeah, the biggest piece of advice is kind of back to that previous question, is to lean into this type of new video type of format, but really be consistent. It's the advice that keeps getting pushed out, but it's so true. I think there's value to the algorithm of just posting on a consistent basis and posting to what the platforms want to see, which is this, type of reel post. I would also suggest to create a like band of brothers almost. I really believe we rise together, and I don't think anyone's a self-made man or woman. I think we're lifted up by those around us. So, one tactic that I used when I was first starting out was actually teaming up with a couple other folks that liked reading books too. And I mean, granted, I might have grew a little faster than them or had a little bit more success than them. And I'm sure others have had more success than me too, but it was valuable to like band together with a couple other folks to kind of share work together and share what's working and all that good stuff. And I do know in the author world, that's a big piece too. With at least the successful authors, they're all like in cahoots together. I always say that they like meet up for masterminds and they share their insights and all that good stuff. But then I do see the through line of, or I guess the comparison of those that aren't having that much success. They're trying to do it all on their own. So I would create that group. And one simple tactic with that is you do an Instagram live with them, because both audiences will get alerted that it's going live. So during quarantine, I would do these Instagram lives. It's actually how my kind of makeshift podcast got started. It was called 15 Minutes with Owen. And I was getting I got a billionaire on board, David McCourt, who's an Irish American, who probably would have never given me his time other than being during COVID. But he had, 50K followers and I might have had 25. And his followers, I'm sure, came over to mine and vice versa. So Instagram Lives is another kind of great low-hanging fruit tactic to support others and to grow your audience.
So when you're creating the post, is there anything specific that you do? Do you just like read some takeaways from the book, or like you mentioned that earlier on, you basically were every single day just sharing some takeaways from the book that you were learning? Did you like do that throughout the whole book, or did you just, focus on one book for a certain period of time and then move to the next one? How was that kind of structured?
Yeah, good question. So I started off literally just sharing like the book cover, and the caption kind of told the story. Maybe it was more of a general kind of explanation, or maybe I nailed into one specific point, and that's absolutely evolved. So what I do today is I'm by no means a summary page. I think there's no value in summaries. I think it's just too much information essentially. But I've coined this phrase a book bite. And essentially, it's just one big idea from one book and kind of just nail in what that is and kind of share that. And I do that through my email newsletter today that goes out on Tuesdays. And I do that through tweet threads and, one off tweets and other kind of social platforms too. So, yeah, it's evolved from like just sharing the cover and sharing a more general reply or a general explanation to a little bit more targeted and specific. And another piece I've kind of done too is like use these reels and I combine a couple books. So I'll grab like 5 related books that I've read or I know are heavily recommended. So I know that a couple of them people have seen, but then 2 or 3 other ones are not as well known. And I love seeing in the comments where people will be like, "Oh my gosh, like I've heard of those 4, but I haven't heard of that 5th one. I'm going to go check it out." But I think what I do really well with those type of reels is, yes, I have some that are like 5 books to become a better leader, but then there's ones where, and I'm a student in the game too, so like I'm always trying to get better at copywriting and headline writing. But I'll try to like frame it as something more like, I don't know, less popular to say, or maybe it's, I don't know, 5 books to like boost your brain health. Like that's not really like something a sentence I feel like most people would say, like how do I increase my brain health? Oh, here's 5 books that you could potentially do. So I'm trying to steer more towards like relatable conversational type of headlines and include books that are aligned with those two. So, if someone is struggling with, I don't have good examples at the top of my head, but if I looked through my feed, I'm sure I'd find one. But something of the sort of like, your boss just yelled at you. What do you do now? Like that happens to a lot of people, I'm sure. Here are 5 books to maybe cope with communication or your internal feelings of that sort, rather than me saying, here are 5 books to deal with your problems or something like that. So
Yeah, I mean, that's like going back to copywriting 101. It's like when we're writing our copy, how can we speak the language of the person we're writing it for? So if you start speaking a fancy verbiage or saying
right.
something that they wouldn't say, they're not going to resonate and want to read it. So if we think about doing our social media post hooks the same way, or even from a shocking point of view as well, then we're going to easily hook them in and catch their attention.
For sure. Absolutely. And I think the other piece too is really just, I'm all about trying to stop the scroll. That's another big focus. So like if you just make it more interesting, whether it's something people say or they don't, but it catches the eye, I think it's it's a good tactic to make them obviously stop the scroll and want to consume the content.
Yeah, cool. So everyone, we're going to link Owen's Instagram page in the show notes as well. So definitely check that out and do some studying. I'm sure you can model a lot of what Owen's doing here. And I think Owen goes pretty wide. He'll often post about a lot of different books. For you, if you just consider with your book, how can you go deep on the one book itself? And you've got so much content in there already. So I think there's a lot of potential for you to model what Owen's doing, but in a format where you just go really, really deep on your book consistently over time.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think most people's books, obviously, unless it's like super, super niche, we might have to have another conversation about that. But most people's books obviously can apply to one of the big 3 kind of, I don't know, big concepts: health, wealth, or relationships. And then even from there, a lot of people structure their books pretty well in the sense that each chapter could be a standalone book as well. So I think it's to dive deeper into that, dive deeper into someone's book. I think it's less of, it won't be as much of a challenge to actually see how this could turn into social content that you could push out there too.
Yeah. And in saying that as well, you might go through your whole book's content from a generalistic standpoint, maybe taking the idea that Owen has around book bites and doing that maybe for potentially each chapter. Even if you go through all of that content, I still think because of the way that social is set up, I don't think you can not go back through it again. Like there's going to be benefit for you to like revise what you're doing or pick a different takeaway from the same chapter and just continue to re-go through the content several times. Like the platform is so like ever changing that people probably, even if they watch the first set of videos, like they're probably forgotten about it already, and you're going to remind them, and I think all of these content bites or book bites will help remind them that your book's probably something that is quite valuable and that they should get their hands on it as well.
Yeah, it's a good point about changing up content in the sense that, like, one thing I never did for so long was actually post very similar content to something that's done very well in the past, mainly off of the concept of you have new followers. They haven't seen the old content. So you could share it again, literally the same piece of content, or you can use the same type of headline and maybe switch something up a little bit. But that's a good point too. It's new people are coming in. Obviously, if someone follows you, that's one thing. But I get so many people consuming my content that don't press the follow button for whatever reason. So there's still people seeing the content that are just passing through and they're coming across the explore page or someone sharing it. So I think there's a lot of value to taking one piece of content or one message and sharing it a bunch of times. They say on Twitter, Twitter's concept is saying one thing 1,000 different times. That's like the whole idea. And then another example I'll give, just because it popped in my head, one of my favorite clients right now, his name is Mark Sides. He's a career coach, former successful entrepreneur, or still an entrepreneur, but just sold his company. And he wrote this book about achieving, early career success, and like just filled with so many pieces of content. Like, one thing I've done for him is, here are 3 questions you should ask on an interview. That, like, the book's not really about interviewing skills or something like that. It's kind of about, getting your resume right, getting your cover letter, how to present yourself well. And it's a bunch of different pieces, but just that one piece, like, we could spend hours and hours talking about how to interview well, or what questions to ask, or how to dress properly. So yeah, I think, if an author really were to dissect their book, they can obviously find the content that they could use that's actually in the book, but then they could also kind of branch out and see all the other ideas that could be, birthed from that one idea that might not actually be directly in the book.
Yeah, I love that. I think, ultimately when we go through editing or even just ideology of the book, there's probably so many other ideas and topics that you weren't able to put into the book due to some level of constraints. So just expanding on that kind of stuff, or even just like, the topics that you did write about, it's like maybe you only had, a chapter to be able to write about that in depth. You could expand on that further, kind of thing.
Yeah. And I don't know if you've seen this or if you consume a lot of Ryan Holiday's content, but him and James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, and Mark Manson, they always say this, that a book before it's a book is an article or a blog, and before that it's a conversation. So what makes it in the book is obviously the best of the best, but there's so much that didn't make it, or maybe other blog articles that did very well and got consumed a ton, but they just, I don't know, it didn't fit it properly. So I think using social platforms as the testing ground for future books, but also for concepts in general that maybe you think are interesting, is just a great use of someone's time and energy. Because if people consume it, more people will want it on a global level, and then you can package it into different formats like a book or something else to sell it and share with the world.
Yeah, I love it. So I would love to know, Owen, what you do specifically with authors. Like, I know you've mentioned you do a few different packages and things like that. I'd love to deep dive a little bit more into like the kind of services that you provide for authors.
Yeah. So the longest standing service has been a 30, 60, or 90-day book promotion, whether it's through the launch or it's just a revival campaign, or the author just wants to keep sharing the book. So we have 120,000 readers that follow the content, and we have a pretty good reach. Like, Instagram gets 2 million impressions organically a month without any work or any ads or any dollars. And then we have a presence on all other platforms too. So that's just one piece. Authors will engage with us for a month or 2 months. So that's probably been like the majority of a lot of the work we've done, just leveraging kind of the audience we've built over 3 years. Another piece is just kind of plain old social media management. So we support folks on creating content around their book, giving them content ideas, managing their social outlets, engaging with other people, kind of doing the Gary V $80 strategy for them, if folks know what that is. And yeah, just like monitoring it on a daily basis and making sure we're getting more reach and more growth and all that good stuff. So that's another piece, that's kind of retainer model. And then the other piece, which is where I've really been spending a lot of my energy in the past, probably since like midsummer, is helping the more business-minded author who has a coaching or consulting business on the back end, because that's where the real money can be made. And either helping them, I've helped folks literally start that and craft the offer around their book and how they can turn it into a month, 1 month, 2 month, or 3 month program. And then I've helped folks kind of put the right pieces in place to scale what they already have or refine their messaging. So one piece on how I do that is I do use a LinkedIn automation system that's proprietary, and I use it for myself to find authors, which works pretty good for me. Obviously, there's a lot of fiction authors that come into that, so it's not a perfect system, but we're continuing to refine it. But ultimately, it just kind of streamlines the lead gen process where you can, spend less time seeking out people that you could potentially have as clients and nurturing people that are already in your ecosystem. So that's still kind of fresh, still kind of new, still kind of perfecting it. Yeah, those are kind of the three main pieces. And then the future focus, I guess, is just building out more channels of how to acquire customers and get people into your ecosystem. And, whether that's like, I don't know if you've explored ManyChat and DM automation, but that's been an interest of mine of seeing how that really can work out, building people's email lists and all that good stuff. And then I guess just various miscellaneous tasks I've done for folks too. Like I've helped people create, like a 21 tip email sequence attached to their freebie to get people into their email list and then have 21 emails, moving forward. So I've helped them structure that too. But all things, I guess, book promotion, audience growth, and I guess you could call it like business builder is kind of the world that we play in.
Yeah, cool, man. So walk me through a typical campaign for your author clients.
Yeah, so we'll take 30 days. So 30 days, we essentially we buy the book, of course, and we absorb the book, create a bunch of content around it. So this is Twitter threads, which is multi tweets under one piece, under one thread, under one tweet, book quotes and one-off tweets that will kind of package into a database. And then I call them face reels, which is me speaking to the camera with subtitles or a piece of content that we create. List reels, which is what I've explained in the just prior with related books, static posts, carousels, graphics of, if you go on the Instagram, you can see like 8 books to blah, blah, blah. And there's pictures of each book. So we'll include the book promo into that book too. But the overall goal is just to create a bunch of social content around someone's book and share it, of course, but also team it up with other like-minded books that people already know. So it's not that hard of a barrier to know, okay, I've read this book, so this book's probably kind of similar. I really enjoyed that book. Let me pass over to this one. So just very content based is really a lot of the work of the promotion. And then we do Amazon reviews, Goodreads reviews, Barnes and Noble reviews as well to boost those numbers too. Amazon reviews have turned into a currency today, which is pretty insane. And authors have dropped their Kindle price down to 99 cents, and we've helped them kind of get a bunch of buys through the Kindle price to leave reviews. So it's, not as expensive on our end, which we cover the cost for that. And then the last piece is adding some ad spend into like Instagram boosted posts as well, which we've seen really increases impressions and link clicks, which are the two metrics we really track. At the end of the day, books, of course, are tough to sell, and they do, the buyer has to make that final decision when they get to the Amazon page. But what we promise or what we guarantee is tons of impressions, up in the hundreds of thousands, which shows us that the message is getting out, and then link clicks, which are a couple of thousands link clicks, which shows us that people are taking action through the organic post or the paid post, going to the link in bio, clicking the story link on Instagram or anywhere else. So yeah, that's it. Might have explained it a little messy, but to encapsulate it all, it's really just very content based and hyping up someone's book, sharing my 2 cents, which I think people really like. It's not a like, this book is crap, I just read it and now I'm gonna go tell the world that it's great. I don't do that whatsoever. There's of course books that I like more than others, but I would say there's always, 1, 2, 3, or even 5 nuggets that I thought were super valuable in a book. And that's what I lean into when I want to share it.
Yeah, sure. Cool, man. So ultimately you create a ton of content for a bunch of different platforms to really help prop up the book, get views on the book, so that people can have that cross comparison to things that they can take away, plus also other books that they've read, so that it makes it kind of a seamless transition between, oh cool, like I need to get this book.
Right. Absolutely. Like everyone's probably heard of Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, but no one's maybe heard of another book that might be just as intense. So it's the vision or the plan of obviously sharing the book on its own as the standalone, but also kind of tying it up with like-minded books. Actually, a good example is a book by Rajiv Kapoor. He wrote a book called Chase Greatness, and it's a leadership book. management new style book for leading Gen Z and the new generations. But it is similar to Michael Dell's book that just kind of came out, which I think is called Play to Win. Michael Dell's the founder of Dell Computers. So everyone knows him in that book, but no one really knows maybe Rajiv as much. So our campaign with him, we tied those two well together. And I think it did pretty well, where people were like, okay, I understand who Michael Dell is. And if he's linked up with Rajiv, then it's worthwhile to check out. And then, hopefully they purchase.
Cool. Well, Owen, thank you so much for all of the nuggets here for social growth and promoting books and things like that. Again, I'm going to link up Owen's Instagram page in the show notes so that you guys can quickly access that and check out what he's doing for strategies over there. Owen, is there anywhere else where you would like our listeners to check out?
Yeah, I know. First and foremost, Chris, thanks for having me. Yeah, Instagram's the main hub. If that's where folks want to go to, we have a link tree, as many others have in their bio. So that's where all the information is, all the other social channels, and you can get onto our newsletter as well. But yeah, if you're an author, feel free to shoot a DM. I answer them all. I read them all, and I'm pretty quick to respond. And if you're a reader, you're probably more suited for our newsletter, where I share these book bites, and I share a public figure once a week, say Elon Musk, for example, and then I find 3 of his book recommendations that he's pushed out into the world, and I share those too. So you can, if you want to read what Elon Musk is reading, not a bad choice, and you can move forward with that through our newsletter. But yeah, we have all things author and reader type of content.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, thanks again for coming on, Owen. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Damn, what an awesome episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing on your podcast platform of choice so you get notified every single time a new episode releases. And if you're struggling with your book sales, head over to smartauthormedia.com/audit to get a free audit of your book sales to see where we can help you bridge the gap between not many sales to a lot of sales. It's a free resource call that we have together, where I give you some clear action steps that you can take to take your stuff from broken to selling. I'll see you over there. Thanks again for listening.